Hello and welcome to this episode of the Sports Psych podcast. Today I am delighted to be joined by Jorja, who is a freelance dance artist and fitness instructor. So welcome, Jorja. To start us off, could you give us a bit of background about yourself and your journey so far?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on here. So I'm a freelance contemporary dancer and fitness instructor. I trained at the Scottish School of Contemporary Dance for 4 years. I think same time as Amelia. I think I was 2 years behind you in training, but on the same course.
Yeah.
So during the time I was doing my degree, I also did a level 2 fitness instructor course at the same time. And after graduating, I went on to a dance development internship with Scottish Dance Theatre. Since then, I've just been kind of freelancing. I moved to Edinburgh recently, and teaching as well as performing. And I've also recently started a level 2 qualification in nutrition and health, so getting more into the kind of well-being space as well as performing.
Brilliant. So kind of dabbling in lots of different things. That's fab. So if you're new to the show, we cover common topics across sports psychology and mental performance and what these mean to different people in their careers. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about mindfulness with you firstly, Jorja. Could you tell us a bit about what mindfulness is and how it's benefited you and your practice?
Yeah, of course. I'd say mindfulness is something I've been interested in or aware of for quite a long time. I've kind of implemented it in the way that I teach, and definitely I've taught kind of mindful movement classes. It was part of my internship project with Scottish Dance Theatre. So I've really enjoyed kind of teaching and sharing those kind of ideas in the way I interact with other people. But I'd say it's more recent that I've actually started to kind of implement those things myself in my kind of everyday life. That was kind of a secondary thing for me that I've really been working on recently. I think especially with lockdown and with all these big kind of changes to schedules and plans and routines, mindfulness has been a really useful tool for me in the way that I approach my practice, but also the way that I kind of ensure that I'm getting rest and recovery time. I think particularly working from home, it can be a bit more difficult to have that kind of boundary between work and home or work and rest time. So I have been practicing mindfulness or doing a little bit of breath work each day. I've been doing lots of yoga. But equally, I think just kind of going for long walks, listening to music, and really kind of trying to do one thing at a time, especially with everything being so technology focused at the moment. It can be a lot going on at once. So I try kind of once a day to turn off all my messages and things, get outside and just really kind of focus on doing one thing for that kind of hour or however long it is. Yeah.
And it really allows for that separation, you know, removing yourself from social media or from your phone or from the internet. It allows you to have that space in your mind and in your day as well. In terms of other strategies that you might use, the dance industry is kind of notoriously cutthroat. So do you have any particular strategies when you're needing to process something negative? Say it's an audition knockback or you've had an injury that's going to put you out of teaching and performing for a while. Do you have any particular strategies that you use psychologically to process something like that?
That's a good question. I'd say, it can be a difficult industry to work in. There's a lot of kind of setbacks or rejection or, a lot of kind of sending off applications and only hearing back from a few of them. But I'd say overall, I do find it a very kind of supportive and kind of community-driven industry to work in. I think the past few months I've become even more aware of this. It's easy to kind of think, oh, there's hundreds of people applying for this or going for the same jobs or residencies or funding, whatever that thing is. But since lockdown, I feel a lot of artists and movement practitioners are kind of struggling financially or struggling with routine and loss of work, things like that. But in my experience anyway, I feel like we really have kind of come together. I've really felt that sense of community more than ever before. So I've been focusing on kind of, voicing what's going on, chatting to other people who turns out are kind of experiencing very similar things and maybe in different ways, but we've all kind of been very affected by the current situation. But equally, I've kind of been considering how I can give back to others, whether that's kind of helping out people who maybe can't afford to come to a class and offering them something for free, or just having conversations with other practitioners. That's kind of been the biggest thing for me at the moment. It's just been that communication, which strangely I feel like I've kind of gained even more since lockdown. We've just all kind of had that time and space to think. Speaking to others is definitely, even when I'm chatting to others, obviously it's to try and benefit them, but I do feel like that is kind of an outlet for me as well. It's always kind of this two-way thing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that despite the time apart, it's actually brought people more together. That kind of opposite, you would think that you'd feel more disconnected, but how have you felt about the connection during this time?
Exactly. I think it's been a strange time. I have felt more connected, as in I've been having more conversations, or maybe more meaningful conversations with other practitioners, other dancers. I also kind of feel a bit more connected to the kind of health and well-being community as a whole. I feel like I've been more open to trying different things, speaking to different kinds of practitioners, and kind of, I guess, realizing we have more in common. We don't have to say I'm a dancer and I just work in dance or fitness or whatever it is. I've been kind of trying new styles of movement, kind of realizing I had a lot more in common with other kinds of practitioners. There is obviously the aspect of touch, which is such a huge thing in all of the work that we do. So that's been a very difficult, strange thing, which I definitely miss, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting back to one day, being able to kind of have contact with other dancers in the studio, or to have that kind of atmosphere of a packed theatre, or even just a class with lots of people in the same room. So that's been more difficult to kind of get used to not having that, but there have been positives in a way of communication, I think.
Definitely. Going back in time a little bit then, straight after graduating from the space in Dundee where you trained, you established your project Remind alongside Scottish Dance Theatre. Could you tell us a little bit about what that project was about and what inspired you to start it?
Yeah, of course. So this was the first year that Scottish Dance Theatre and the Bridge Awards collaborated to offer this dance development internship. So it hadn't really been done before. I just saw the kind of call out. It was a very open brief. I think it was it basically had to be a dance or movement project with any kind of social cause, so something that would benefit the community. And this was around the time I just started to get more interested in the ideas of mindfulness, and also I love dance as an art form, but I'm becoming more and more interested in just the benefits of movement in general, particularly for people that don't necessarily experience movement in their everyday lives. So I just wanted something really inclusive, really open, really accessible, that could benefit a wide range of people, and that I could offer, which was kind of an outlet for them, but also something that they could maybe take away and do in their own time. And I think mindfulness was a great way to approach it. The classes were movement based. I would use influences from my dance training, from improvisation, from other movement forms, but the kind of underlying theme of the whole thing was mindfulness, and also just a kind of sense of it being quite a playful, fun time for people to kind of get away from their everyday lives. I think sometimes there can be a bit of this idea that mindfulness or meditation has to be something that you do by yourself. You sit in a dark room and close your eyes and have to sit completely still, and obviously that's perfectly valid and useful to many people, but for some that can be quite a difficult thing to do, or at least a difficult place to start with mindfulness. So I think using movement can just help people to gently kind of ease off their bodies. Connecting to the mind I guess it's a two-way pull. The mind can help the body can help the mind. And it's also just a chance to kind of connect with other people. And I tried to give people some little exercises they could go away and do in between the classes or afterwards, or just ideas that they could kind of take into their day rather than it just being like an hour a week. And that's kind of what we do.
Mm-hmm. And how does the findings of the research and the things that you explored during that time, how does that inform your practice now in 2020?
Yeah, I would say that was a huge learning curve for me. I was very interested in lots of these ideas before the internship. So for my final project of my degree, I did a project with dancers, exploring ocular centrism, or this kind of dominance of the vision compared to the other senses. And that was the kind of first time I got really interested in this kind of sensory, somatic aspect of movement. But I felt it wasn't too accessible. It was very specific to dancers, which was great. But Remind was the first time I really kind of opened that up and tried to see how I could apply that to many more people. Yes, starting where they're at rather than feeling like they have to kind of dive into this super arty creative world, but it can be quite a relaxed, fun thing to do. And yeah, I think I've taken both of those ideas forward with me. I'm currently performing when I can, obviously before lockdown, but
Mm-hmm.
a large part of my practice is teaching dance and also teaching fitness. So the styles I teach range from contemporary dance, ballet, but also things like circuit classes, bar, ballet fitness, things like that. But I'm trying as much as possible to have these kind of underlying themes of this kind of explorative, this mindful approach to everything. It can be, I do teach mindful movement, so it can be a very kind of slow, relaxed class, which is more kind of obviously a mindful thing. But even when I'm teaching a super high energy bar or circuit class, I try to help encourage people to have that awareness of what's going on in their bodies, and especially that kind of understanding of knowing what's good for your body, knowing when to take it easy, when to push more. That's all part of mindfulness. I think it can be applied in so many more aspects than just mindfulness alone.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned integrating it into your classes. I think it's really important that psychological concepts and well-being concepts are not seen as a separate construct. It's something that, for example, in sport, you're not going to sit and have a psychology workshop or something like that. I think it's integrating the two together, the physical and the psychological. So it's great to hear that that's something that's already part of your practice. So moving on slightly, you've also got a background in somatic research, and this is something that you're planning on exploring with Dance Space in Edinburgh over the next year. Could you explain what your ambition is for that year that you're going to have with Dance Space, and any areas that you think are going to be interesting off the back of that?
I've just been just had the news quite recently that I've been taken on as one of Dance Space's Deb's mentorees for the next year. It basically just means we get mentored for the year, we get some studio space, and just involved in lots of discussions and opportunities, which is going to be amazing. And yes, I think I'd been maybe a little bit stuck career-wise for a while. I'm loving teaching and I'm loving performing, but I still have lots of kind of ideas that I want to express or to access or to explore further. And I think as a dancer, lots of people feel like you have to choreograph or you have to have a performance, a product of everything that you do. And I'd had lots of ideas for a while that I'd been kind of bubbling in the back of my mind about these kind of somatic sensory ideas, or just this kind of idea of looking at movement as a whole rather than splitting off into these separate mediums. And it was actually during my interview for the DEBS program, I just kind of had this like light bulb moment where I was speaking about all this research I wanted to do and how I didn't know how to do my research because I didn't want to make a piece. And Lucy, the mentor, just said, well, you can apply for residencies or funding or whatever it is, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make a piece. You might want to evidence your research in some way, but there are so many ways that you can do that. You could research and then write something. You could maybe make a podcast or a talk. A workshop could be the product of your research. And yeah, I've just kind of opened up my mind as to kind of the possibilities of what I can do with these ideas now. So at some point in the future, I might decide to choreograph something, but right now I'm interested in just kind of diving into research as a thing. I guess research doesn't always have to be to create a project. Research can be a really valid and useful thing by itself, and I'm interested to see where I can go with research, maybe with professional dancers, but I'm also really interested in inclusivity and just getting people involved in movement and understanding and having that awareness of their bodies.
Mm-hmm. And what I'll do as well is in the show notes of this podcast, I'll link your social media profiles so that people can kind of follow that journey when it eventually begins, hopefully soon because of this current situation. So talking of the coronavirus situation then, during this time away from normality, what has filled your time and what's your experience of lockdown been like?
So yeah, it's been an interesting one. I had lots of kind of work, lots of projects lined up. I was teaching lots of classes in Edinburgh, and I had some other performances lined up for the summer, and obviously all that's kind of either cancelled or postponed, or nobody kind of really knows what's happening with that at the moment. So it was like a kind of clean slate, starting again, like figuring out how I want to spend my time. And yeah, I'd say for me it has been a very big change. I've been busy, I've been working away, but I've definitely become more aware of the fact I maybe was a little bit overworked before lockdown, and I've really taken time to consider how I'm spending my time, I guess. So I've been teaching lots of online classes, which are open for people to sign up to. I've also been working more with kind of private, like one-to-one clients or small groups, and really kind of found value or found enjoyment in that kind of connection of working one-to-one with people, or that time to really talk about what we're doing or what's going on in our bodies or how we're feeling when we're doing things. I've really been enjoying. I've been getting involved in lots of kind of these big kind of industry-wide conversations at the moment around the kind of funding structures in the arts and in movement, and whether there are things we can change or make work better after all this. I think there will be some very big changes. But yeah, equally, I've been enjoying having a bit of time to actually train for myself and have some rest and, catch up with old friends, things like that. I was so busy before kind of training other people and teaching classes, which I love doing. But I was getting very kind of pigeonholed into the styles that I teach. And since lockdown, I've been taking lots more of other people's classes and actually loving learning more about movement myself, diving into other styles. Been doing yoga almost every day, which I hadn't had the time to do in a while. I've been doing my friends' HIIT classes every week, even trying some other styles of dance, and really enjoying all of that.
Mm-hmm. And you're in Shetland, is that right? Yeah. So you've had time away from the city. How has that impacted on your mindset? Leaving the city and going to somewhere that's so rural.
Yeah, that's been a huge thing as well. So for the first 2.5-3 months of lockdown, I was in a very small flat in Edinburgh where I'd been living for like almost a year, and that was an interesting experience. I think I did already experience a lot of the benefits of the kind of time and space to train and things like that, but it was difficult being in a small space, and you can go out for a nice walk, but you're always kind of in the city. So I was enjoying the fitness side, but I was kind of feeling a little bit blocked creatively. So I was basically one of these many people in the UK who have been excluded from government supports and have kind of struggled financially in the current situation. I kind of managed to stay for a little while in Edinburgh, but then in the end just decided it's easier to take a step back come and stay with family up in Shetland, and just take this time to really kind of figure out what the next steps are, take a little step back. So I've been here almost a month now, and yeah, it's difficult being away from friends and the kind of place you're used to calling home, but I've definitely loved being in this like amazing landscape, feeling much more kind of creatively inspired. You'll see I've been posting lots of like dance videos, dancing outside, and
yeah, it looks
really
amazing.
enjoying kind of improvising. Yeah, there's incredible light up here. Obviously, we're so far north that stays light nearly all night. Sometimes you get these beautiful sunsets, but also I quite like when it's cloudy and you just get this like amazing sunlight coming through. So that's been, it's been a nice change. Just so much open space. It's nice to get outside more.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really beneficial, actually, having that space geographically, but also mentally. You know, you're away from the city and kind of regular work life, if you like. So to kind of close off the show, is there anything that you know now, having had a few years in the industry, that you wish that you knew when you were starting out?
Oh, lots of things.
Yeah.
I think I've known for a long time how much I love dance and how much I love movement, and that's kind of always been a part of my life. But yeah, as I said before, it's easy to kind of get pigeonholed into your area or your kind of, this is what I do and I have to do that every day. But since graduating, I've always kept dance as the main part of my practice and the main part of my career. But I've just been so much more open-minded recently to other forms of movement, other forms of well-being in general, and I've taken a lot more time to actually research things I find interesting in depth. I think particularly when we're working full-time and or working multiple jobs as so many freelancers do, it's easy to kind of give, and I've actually taken much more time recently to research things I'm interested in, to read, to listen to podcasts, to be so much more open to information and just constantly developing my practice. So I think just it's good to remind ourselves that we can always do that. We're never done learning. I've been learning so much about well-being and about movement as a whole recently, and I think it's good to keep an open mind.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jorja. It's been really interesting hearing your journey so far and the potential for where you're going to be going next. As I said, I'll link your social media platforms in the show notes so that anyone can check those out if they wish. So once again, you've been a fab guest, and thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.